Hey everybody, welcome to Temz Offgrid. Tonight we're going to talk about a few different topics. The first one that we're going to dive into is what's going on with the upcoming eclipse, right? So everybody got your Eclipse glasses. I've had these hanging around for a few years. They're a bit crinkled, wrinkled, folded, whatever. But let's go over some safety stuff that has to do with the eclipse. And there may be some ISO requirements that some people need to be aware of. So there's an email that I got today that I'm going to pull up if you bear with me for a moment. So just bear with me. I'm pulling that thing up right quick. And it is a live stream, so I don't know that anything's perfect here. So bear with me. Here we go. And I'm going to pull up the link to this. And the title of the article was Everything You Need to Know. And here we go. I think everybody at this point knows Monday, April 8th, obviously. Some of the key points are, solar eclipse safety, right? So on this link, and I'm going to post this link into the chat because I just thought it was a wealth of information here. So I'll put this into the chat so that y'all can view this and you can look this up later on and learn more about lots of details around the solar eclipse and read about that. So let's go through a couple of those. You can make a solar eclipse viewer with a cereal box. How to use a shoebox to make a solar eclipse viewer. So really cool projects for kids and stuff like that. Where can I get solar eclipse viewing glasses? Are your solar eclipse glasses safe? And when you look at that one part of it, you're looking at the ISO standard, and I see the 12312-2:215, right? So that's right there on the ones that I have. Eclipse shades that I've had for a long time because I was prepared for when some solar eclipse came. I don't even remember when, but I've had this for a really long time. All right. And there's a whole bunch of information on this website just to help people. And look, you've got 20 funny solar eclipse jokes. Send us your photos, videos, and drawings, all kinds of stuff here. The best one here is be prepared for the total solar eclipse. So that's an article that they have on here. And they go through what a total solar eclipse is, and they show you some drawings of that and pictures. This is not going to occur again in North America until August 22nd, 2044. That's why it's important that you get out there and you're able to see this one. So it's going to be 20 years and a few months before this comes around again. And then they have some really good maps on here about where it's going to come across the United States. And I think you've all seen some articles that are on YouTube and places like that. They're talking about some of these towns and some of these cities. They're going to see the total solar eclipse, where the rest of us are going to see some version of that. But if you're in that stripe that comes right across through Texas and a bunch of these other states, I see a portion of Arkansas, a little, maybe tiny portion of Tennessee, maybe not, upward over top of Kentucky, Ohio, part of Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, etc., going all the way up through there. So follow that link I put into the chat, wealth of information there. I think what comes behind the solar eclipse is questions that we had on the last live stream. So some people are asking, how can I be prepared for the solar eclipse? I'm like, all right, let's think about that. How can I be prepared for the solar eclipse? What do you want to be prepared about, right? And some of these articles were in some of these towns where they're going to have an influx of people who are coming in to see the solar eclipse. They're going to overcome probably some of the infrastructure that's in those towns, whether it's they're going to take all the hotel rooms, they're going to clean out all the groceries in the grocery stores, they're going to overwhelm the fast food restaurants because you've got more than the normal population that's coming to some of these small towns. So you have some of that that's going on there. All right. Now, others have said, well, I've read these articles or I've seen these videos about there's going to be power outages or this or that's going to happen. Well, how prepared are you for anything right now, right? So how prepared are you for a normal situation? So let's say I'm going to give you two really good examples. There was a time, 2001, when I went to a job interview at North Anna Nuclear Power Plant. And I want to say this was February of 2001. They let me know during the interview that it was really starting to snow that day. And I'm not so sure that it was predicted to be as bad as it was. And I said, no, I want to stay and get this interview finished. And I was not too long out of the Navy, so I was going to have to go back all the way to Norfolk. I finished the interview and I start driving, and it got real interesting on 95. Or actually, I was on 64. So I was on 64 and I was headed towards the beach. So I was headed east, right? I look through the median to westbound side, and I can see pileups of cars, completely burned out 18 wheelers, and things like that. Like people lost visibility or traction or whatever it was, and there were a lot of pileups. And that was just 64, right? It took me 8 hours to get from, I guess that's Louisa County to Norfolk, 8 hours that day. A friend of mine, he was on 95 south, and there was a 300 car pileup that day. And you can probably research this on Google or whatever, and look for 2001 300 car pileup, 95 south, whatever, right? He was in that pileup, not physically in it, but he was in the backup that it caused for over 24 hours in his car. So what I just asked y'all, you say, how should I be? So he would have liked to have had food, water, blankets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Probably a hand trowel, some toilet paper, a bunch of these different things in the car. We call that the get home bag, right? There was also just, I believe it was last year, and maybe it was Buffalo or some of those other areas up north, these historic snowstorms that were happening, and people were trapped in cars. And they couldn't tell if we got everybody rescued out of their cars or not. I believe that there were some unfortunate events that were reported, etc. Those were extreme circumstances. But again, what would you have in your car to get you from point A to point B if your car was no longer mobile? What do you need, etc. So for a solar eclipse, if you were worried about a power outage or something like that, what you need to do is already have prepared for all this ahead of time, so you don't have to prepare for the solar eclipse or prepare for the power outage. So, think through how large is your family, how much food or water would you need for X number of days to make you feel comfortable. And we talked about on our last video too, that extra food that you have is food insurance, right? If you get some long-term food storage, especially 25-year, number 10 cans, freeze-dried, etc., you're looking at 25 years of food insurance, and you won't have to rotate out that very frequently if you're going with normal canned goods, canned meats for 5 years, or maybe it's canned vegetables for 2 to 3 years, etc. Or you've got some canned tuna, canned salmon. Make sure it's the deboned canned salmon, as we learned and we talked about before. You have to watch all those expiration dates. Do not add something to your food stores that you don't eat on a regular basis. Only put stuff in there that you're going to eat. All right. So don't forget that. It's super important. For water, if you have containers of stored water for the unexpected event, rotate those out on regular frequencies. If it's tap water, it's got some chlorine in it that's going to store longer. If it's well water, you have to put a few drops of chlorine, and you can go online and find out what those examples are. So how many drops per gallon, etc. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it could be something as simple as 5 drops per gallon or something like that. You want to use unscented bleach when you do that. If you don't have bleach, you can use calcium hypochloride in their mixtures for that as well. If you store it, I would store it in its original pouches and not store it in anything else, because you can also read some articles about how it will expire over time, just like bleach expires over time. So chlorine in the bleach expires over time. It's not as potent. It won't do what you're expecting it to do, etc. All right. So food, water, meds. Make sure you have meds for preparedness. Any medications you need, whether that's over-the-counter prescription meds. A lot of times now you do 90 days worth of prescriptions. and you can work through that. There are also some online pharmacies that can assist you with getting other types of medicines that you may not normally have. Remember, we've talked about other types of medicines that you may not normally have in Alton's antibiotics and infectious diseases. This book will guide you to all the different types of infections that you might have, what types of antibiotics treat those, etc., so that you're aware. Now, obviously, only doctors prescribe those antibiotics. They're not to be used for your fish or your pets or anything like that. So make sure that you understand what it is that you're researching and how all that occurs, etc. All right. So with that out of the way, we'll come back to the solar eclipse. Follow that link there, do your research, make sure you know where you're located, where it's going to start, where it's going to be at its most fantastical point, when it's going to be subsiding, etc. I've already cleared out on my calendar some time on there so that we're not going to be in meetings. We're going to go outside and we're going to get prepped up and ready to see this thing, because I'm not waiting 20 years to see it again, right? So we're going to be ready for it. We're going to try to, whether we can get some photos, videos, whatever it is, right? And I'm sure YouTube will be flooded with all that stuff too, but we want to experience it and have a good time with it. All right. So outside of that, y'all can ask questions later on when you view this, post in the comments, ask questions about the solar eclipse and all that good stuff. Let's dig into the knots. So one of my favorite books is Not Know-How, and that's it right here. And it's how to tie the right knot for every job, right? So that's the name of this book. It's interesting that you'll see where I got this book. USS Constitution Museum. And it was $15.95 when I bought it. And I think that was 2010. I looked it up today, like August of 2010, when I bought this book. When you go on Amazon, it is still the same price, but it is a little cheaper. So it's amazing that we are 14 years later and the book got cheaper. How is that? But I really have enjoyed this book because as you go in here, it'll start out with the 10 knots everybody should know, etc. And then it goes into a lot of the other types of knots for use for different situations. It'll go through the hitches, it'll go through loops, stopper knots, etc. So again, this is the the Not Know-How book. You can get it on Amazon. It's less than $15, and it goes through and it'll have illustrations to show you everything about tying knots. And there we go. That's a little bit better. So this is one of the books that I've used a lot of times when I'm tying knots. Outside of the Not Know-How book that I've used, I have so many different versions of the Boy Scout handbook that I just grab one off the shelf. This is one from probably the late 2000s. This is that version of the Scout book. And I just go through here and I go back through the pictures. I will tell you, if you go grab one of the older versions of a Boy Scout handbook, it's not gonna work out so well. Over here on that shelf behind me, I've got many, 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 many years of Boy Scout handbooks. If you go to some of these older ones, and this one I think is 60s, 1959 is this one. This is the 6th edition, so this one's 1959. If you come into this one, obviously it's not going to have illustrations like what you're going to have in later years. But I did want to go over here to the knots and look and see just how the illustrations are in here. So it looks like on page 62, they start with a bowline. So let's take a look at it real quick, because you can find these books pretty cheap still on eBay and places like that. And that's where I've gotten a lot of these. So yeah, their illustrations are okay in this book. So like here's the illustration of clove hitch, it looks like right there. So, and that looks like, obviously square knot or reef knot up at the top. So in sheep bend, et cetera, et cetera. But I have a lot of these older Scout books. I do go through these and look at and see how they're teaching the knots as compared to how they taught the knots in latter years, as compared to how some of the knots are in some of your modern books. What you're going to see on the channel right now is that I'm going through and systematically doing tutorials on how to tie different knots. So right before this meeting started, I was uploading the double figure 8. So that was the one I was working on at that period of time. It did upload. It's up there now. Um, it is obviously in, I mean, there it is right there playing. So there's your double figure eight. So it did upload. I've got a little, guar background music, the road behind. A lot of times I'll start with the intros to songs versus getting into the words of songs. All right. So the double figure eight, that's your climbing and rappelling knot for the climber or rappeller. It is the most important knot that we have probably for anybody that's going to do stuff like that. And I'll put a link in one of them on where to get this rope. This rope's been great for teaching knots and practicing knots and stuff like that. Also, I'm going to do a tutorial on the monkey fist. The monkey fist is great, especially if you've got to toss the rope over a limb, get the rope back up over the limb. Maybe you're going to tie a lark's head or something like that through the rope. Remember, the lark's head looks a bit like this, obviously. So some people may have a different name for it, whatever. So, and my ropes are a little bit twisted, sorry. So that was coming out a little bit crazy, but that's your lark's head. And that's one of the uses of throwing a rope up over a tree limb or something like that. So we're going to be working on knot tying and things like that, knot tying tutorials. And those have gotten a lot of traction on the website here over the last couple of days, obviously 24 hours, because I just started doing the knot tying tutorials last night, but they've gotten a lot of traction. And when I do these, I do them and tie them at the perspective of you're looking over my shoulder. So it's, like point of view, obviously, when I'm doing these. So it's easier for you to tie it because it's like it's your own hands, etc. So even when you see the square knot, right over left, left over right, taut line hitch, 2 in, 1 out, 2 half hitches, 1 in, 1 out, double figure eight. I'm not saying all the words, but you see what I'm doing, like when I'm twisting the rope and pulling the rope back through to make the figure eight. And then I'm tracing the figure eight with the original rope all the way through and then back up. So you will see in those hand movements, and I'm moving slow enough, and most times I'm going to tie that knot twice so you really can see what's going on there. All right, let's talk about life tent a little bit. So when we were on spring break last week and we were hiking in the Smokies, I had received 2 life tents for Christmas presents, and I wanted to get those out there and try one of them out while I was hiking, see how hard it was to set up, see how practical it was, etc. When you go watch the first life tent video that was done in the Smoky Mountains, the wind was horrific out there that day. I was doing the Brushy Mountain hike, which is where you start either at Grotto Falls or Rainbow Falls parking lot out there in the Smoky Mountains National Forest. You get onto the Trillium Gap Trail, and you've got to follow Trillium Gap Trail all the way to the top, past Grotto Falls, and then you'll see the sign to go on Brushy Mountain. I did record the entire trek over to Brushy Mountain, as did I take in the views and record those, etc. So you'll see all that, which is very cool. But what you want to think about here is in that environment where I was trying to work, the wind was just like, right? It was blowing so hard that day, they ended up closing the park. They closed the park already in there, right? So I got there, and you'll see the initial video where I got there, 6 something in the morning. The tree is across the road. I didn't realize my saw was in the trunk. I thought I left it somewhere else. So I was breaking limbs off of that tree to drive around it to get into the park. So what the Park Service did, they probably saw the tree and they went ahead and shut the park down and closed the gates. So that's why I never saw anybody on the hike the whole time, either up or down. Nobody in the parking lot. And then when I got ready to leave, I had to go through those 2 gates. So it was an interesting day, but there was a super high wind. Back to the life tent. Super high winds. I'm trying to set up this live tent. It's getting blown all over the place while I'm trying to set it up. Made it very difficult. But I still set it up and did some filming and tried to show what that looked like. So it wasn't ideal. So later we set it up at the hotel out on the deck and tried to show what that looked like with a live tent, and came up with that idea of putting the hammock through the live tent and showing y'all what that would look like. That's the idea, because a lot of times when you camp with a hammock, you're open on both ends. Even if you have that tarp over your hammock, it's open on both ends. So the life tent very well could be whatever you're going to put over top of your hammock if you want your hammock to be that close to the ground. That's the only thing to be aware of if you're in the life tent and you're trying to run that hammock through there. You only got a couple feet to work with to be off the ground. All right. Moving on from that, we brought the life tent home and we started putting the life tent up over here on the side yard in the Leland cypress trees. And I wanted to see, how do you seal the ends of the life tent? How do we see how it goes day over day? Is the wind or the rain going to beat this thing to death? Because it's essentially two mylar blankets that are sealed together to form a loop, so to speak, right? That's what the life tent is for $20. And I can buy two mylar, blankets for $2. But you're also paying for them to seal that thing. You're paying for the bag. You're paying for that whistle. You're paying for all those things, right? Needless to say, we set it up and we had 2 days of storms that came through. I duct taped both ends of it, which duct taping it fully is not realistic because how are you going to breathe and what's going to happen with all the moisture and condensation, right? So no matter what, you're still going to have to vent that even if you tape a lot of it up, right? So I did notice as we taped up the sides that it kind of leans in like this. All right. So you could probably put your vents up high, and the way it leans like that, maybe with the rain coming down like this, it wouldn't make its way into your vents. All right. So just some ideas behind that. But so far, so good. The life tent is dry inside, surprisingly. And then we're going to do some camping with it before we finally retire it or put it away or whatever. Right. Okay. So that was life tent. The last thing we want to talk about a little bit tonight was the get home bag because we started out with the Eclipse and, last live stream's questions around, well, should I be prepared for the Eclipse? Well, you should already be prepared. You should be preparing for anything. You should always be prepared. All right. So on that topic, let's pull out one of the get home bags. So this is one of the get home bags. And I have get home bags and I have spreadsheets with inventories for what's in the get home bags. And we have this for every vehicle. So you never know what vehicle you're going to be in. And you don't want to have to worry about, did I take the get home bag from vehicle A and did I put it in vehicle B, etc. All right. So this is an M48 Ops bag. And I'm pretty sure I got this from like budk.com. But you can get similar bag from pretty much anywhere, right? The compartmentalization, multiple pockets is what's important. And I'm going to put my glasses on just to make sure I'm looking at everything right. So I will tell you, like, keeping things in the similar or same pockets, the consistency of that will help you as you're looking for stuff too. Duh, right? Anyways, you get your compass, duct tape, right? I always get these small rolls of duct tape. You've got your hand sanitizer. There's a video I did last week that said, what's the scoop on poop, right? Serious that video, because how many of y'all are prepared to do your business when you're out there on a hike? There are not porta johns everywhere on a hike. You got to be prepared. I've got the hand trowel so you can dig the cat hole. And we always carry some toilet paper because certain times of year I'm not going to be able to get the right leaves I'm looking for, etc. And I'm serious. We had to do that a lot when I was growing up as a kid in Mississippi. So these are some of the first items here. And I know that like duct tape and a compass aren't related to toilet paper and a hand trowel, but I'm just showing you what some of these things are. I've got a roll of moleskin in here. So there's so much moleskin, I can put some of this in some of the other go bags. I think it just ended up in this go bag. And then also in this compartment, I've got the ponchos. So disposable ponchos, because you never know. You always want to be prepared for rain. And I've got the Mylar blankets in here. So a bunch of different emergency blankets made of Mylar are right up in this section right here. All right. That's 84 inches long by 54 inches. That's a pretty big Mylar bag. And you saw, if you watched when I did the video of the Bullhead Trail hike, I show you a potential area for a solo overnight over there, off grid. And in that video, I say, hey, we're going to use this Mylar bag for the bottom and this one for the top, right? So that's probably a good idea of bringing more than one Mylar bag wherever you go. All right, let's take a look in this compartment. You'd have your whistle. It's got some of your matches in here. All right, and a compass that probably I wouldn't depend on it. That's why I have the other compass, the real compass in there. I always have a pocket knife in here. You may have seen this before. My really good flint and steel is in there. So when you go buy a flint and steel, don't go buy this flint and steel. Do not buy this. You will see this is super cheap. Don't buy it. Go and buy this flint and steel. All right. So one of this or equivalent. I mean, look at the size of the rod on this one right here. That's the one that you want. Now I've done some videos with the blast match also. All right, remember your metal is right here at the thumb and you push down and it sparks. All right, so those are a couple of my flint and steels that are in this go bag. And I also felt that we have a Fresnel lens in here, not to be confused with a Fresnel lens because the S is silent. Fresnel lens. Make sure y'all get that right because I totally got that wrong in the beginning. All right, so you got your flint and steel in here. If you've seen enough of my videos, what comes hand in flint and steel? Yeah, cotton balls and Vaseline. So last week when I was on the Appalachian Trail in Tennessee, I went to one of the shelters where a bunch of the thru hikers were, and I talked to them and wanted to learn about some of the equipment that they carry, etc. And they explained to me they were having a very hard time starting the campfire that night, the night before I met them, but that there was an Eagle Scout and his father were there camping with them, and they showed them how to start fire, right? Even if everything was wet. We've done some of those videos here where you start with wet firewood, you break it apart, you see the center of the sticks is still dry. Make sure the center of those sticks is towards where you put the cotton balls and Vaseline so you can get those going. Start with small sticks and go from there. But I ended up giving the thru hiker some of my cotton balls and Vaseline. I also gave him some of my fat wood and I offered him one of my flint and steel. But of course, the thru hiker is always going to be worried about what they're carrying, how much that weighs, et cetera, et cetera. Also in here, I've got some of the water treatment like iodine tabs, just in case, right? Always keep those. Even in the backpack that goes to work with me has a lot of go items in my backpack that goes to work. But every vehicle has a go bag in it. All right, so that's the first couple compartments in the get home bag. Next is the next compartment. I do keep some fat wood in the go bag or get home bag. I always keep some 550 cord in the get home bag as well as first aid kit in here. Food, right? I always keep enough food for about 3 days. These are 400 calorie Millennium bars. So let's take a look at these. So Millennium bars, you'll find these on Amazon. They usually have a 5-year expiration date. They have a whole bunch of different flavors. Now, obviously, that one was like apricot. This one's tropical fruits. You got orange, you got vanilla. There's a whole bunch of different ones. What I try to do is come up with enough calories for each person for about 3 days, and I will store that many Millennium bars in each go bag. All right, because that's important. I think that you need to take in consideration that wherever you are, you might not be able to boil some water to make a dehydrated meal or something like that. But anywhere you're at, you can break this open and start eating it. So I've stored these in get home bags in cars for years and pulled them out and eaten them, right? I'm not worried about them like I would be a Cliff Bar that's getting hot, cold with its chocolate and all these other things that are in a Cliff Bar, where these aren't going to have all that kind of stuff. And you see they're perfectly sealed up too, and they're not bad. If you have an opportunity, I would say get out there and try some of these, add them to your get home bag, etc. So that way you've got them. All right, once we get past that area in the get home bag, we're going to move to the next compartment in here. And that's a very important compartment. And remember, when I started talking about the get home bag on this portion of the video, we talked about standardization of what's in each one of the pockets of the get home bag so you know where to find stuff and you can find it quickly. This compartment here in the back, I usually have 2 maps in here. They're not in this one for whatever reason, but it's because we live closer to 2 states. So I have a map of each one of the states, and I keep that in the get home bag. In this one here, I put I just say this is a bush pot, right? So if you needed to boil some water, if you don't have a pot, you're not going to be able to. And I keep the Esbit stove in here. I don't keep Jetboil or any of those others in here. It's the Esbit stove, and the Esbit stove has its little cube fuel in here. So there is a video I did to compare the Esbit stove to the Jetboil to the Pocket Rocket, and I keep the Esbit stove in here. All right. You have a couple flashlights in this compartment too. I would have one for each person that's in your party. Some toothpaste and some toothbrushes, right? Some deodorant, some body wipes. I will tell you that creature comforts, when you are on a long trek home, will be very important. I've got a Ziploc in here, and in this Ziploc, I've got Sawyer Mini. And remember, Sawyer Mini has the ability to put a little straw in here, and you can drink through the Sawyer Mini with a straw, or you can use the pouch, the squeeze pouch, all right, with the Sawyer Mini. Or you can use the life straw. I also have the life straw in here. A lot of the through hikers are using the Sawyer Squeeze, all right? And the important thing about Sawyer Squeeze, from what they shared with me, is freezing temperatures at night. They have to make sure they get that in their sleeping bag with them or somewhere thereabouts so it doesn't freeze overnight. Water, right? I usually keep at least 8 bottles of water in the get home bag, with the idea that you will filter more water as time goes on. I just so happen to have the mother of all Fresnel lenses in this go bag. Actually planted it. But anyways, I'm dropping some of these items back in here. Get creative with your go bag. Think about what you need in there. If you have multiple people in the car, then you can spread your wealth between go bags. The other thing we didn't talk about was a change of clothes in the go bag. The next thing I would say is, if you're used to wearing business or business casual to work, that you have some athletic shoes that you keep in your trunk. So if you've got to abandon your car, and I want you to think about in 2001 on September 11th, I started to have team members work for me that were there that day when I started working in the city. And they told me stories about what it took to get home that day. Mass transit wasn't working. There was a lot of walking. All right. So many people that worked in the city, business casual, think of the leather bottom shoes and how uncomfortable that would have been. Right. And I'm not saying these folks drove to work, but at work, maybe you have a different go bag that has a nice change of clothes that's appropriate for that time of year, with the right shoes and socks, and with the right first aid supplies, moleskin, things like that, that you have in your car or you keep it at work. And it goes back to the start of this conversation, the eclipse. What do I need to do to get ready for the eclipse? Nothing. You should always be ready. And this is also like in the Navy or where I work today, where we would call it a zone inspection in the Navy. And that's when your division officer or other higher ranking officers are going to come through and walk through your spaces. They're going to look at your maintenance standards. They're going to look at plant conditions. They're going to look at your paint, and they're going to look at your cleanliness level. Oh, we got to get ready for the zone inspection. And just like we do at work, we got to get ready for this VP who's going to come walk through. You should always be ready. You shouldn't have to get ready. You shouldn't just get ready because that person's coming. You're always ready for the pride in what you have. And for your family and for yourself, you should always be ready for what's coming. All right, we're going to end this live stream. Appreciate it. I know many of you weren't able to join. You'll get to view this later on, but appreciate it. Please continue to share, thumbs up, like, subscribe, and we'll keep growing this channel. And we're going to move from knots, and then we'll start doing lashings after that, and just keep on going. All right. Appreciate everybody. Y'all have a great rest of the week. Have a good weekend. If we don't see you before then, have an awesome Eclipse day. Don't miss it, because it's going to be another 20 years. All right. We'll see everybody.